we're live. Let's just get my screen a bit much brighter because, yeah, it's a fucking sun shit. It should be gone. It should be gone soon. But, hey. So, anyone watching this should know that I started this story time with the group as a group, when I moved to Dunedin. And our first book is The Women's Room by Marilyn French even. So there's like a few issues with it in that, like, not everyone can make it every week. Also, there's Alice up in Christchurch. Oh, Alice in Christchurch, just making it difficult. Oh God, it's so sunshiny. How do we? Hold on. Sorry, anyone who may watch this. What if we? Oh man, maybe that way. Okay, this. Sorry about this, lad. So yeah, basically the idea was that it's a bit tricky to make everyone there at the same time and place. And then as well after that we invited new people to the group, and not everyone was there for the start of the thing. And I really like the first chapter of this. I really like the way the mirror character is introduced, and you know, how we start from a certain perspective and work backwards. But I'm gonna just go and draw the curtain over there, and yeah, I'll get straight into the book. Cute. Yeah. Well, that makes everything better. Not everything better, but what about that? Alright, we're going to call that manageable. I think the general idea is for this to be not a public thing anyway. So, on that, just put a page in for where the main story's at. Oh, a little bit of fabric. So, The Women's Room by Marilyn French. I think I need to do a burp. Windy. Mira was hiding. Alright, so chapter 1, part 1. Mira was hiding in the ladies' room. She called it that, even though someone had scratched out the word ladies in the sign on the door and written women's underneath. She called it that out of 38 years of habit, and until she saw the cross out on the door, had never thought about it. Ladies' room was a euphemism, she supposed, and she disliked euphemisms on principle. However, she also detested what she called vulgarity, and had never in her life, even when handling it, uttered the word shit. But here she was, at the age of 38, huddled for safety in a toilet booth in the basement of Sever Hall, gazing at, no, studying the word and others of the same genre, scrawled on the grey enamelled door and walls. She was perched, fully clothed, on the edge of the open toilet seat, feeling stupid and helpless, and constantly looking at her watch. It would have been all redeemed, even translated into excitement, had there been some grim-faced Walter Matthau in a trench coat, his hand in a gun-swollen pocket, or some wild-eyed Anthony Perkins in a turtleneck, his itching strangler's hands clenching and unclenching, if she had been sitting in panic searching for another way out. Sorry. I'm real conscious that this couch is just not aligned to. Kind of want to talk to the camera, but the book's over here, so I'm trying to get my shit together. Promise, it's better if you just come Wednesday 7 o'clock. Just come. It's much better. But of course, if that were the case, There would also be a cool and desperate Cary Grant or Burt Lancaster sliding along the walls of another hallway, waiting for Walter to show himself. And that, by itself, she thought mournfully, feeling somehow terribly put upon, would have been enough. If she had one of them, any one at all, waiting for her at home, she would not be hiding in a toilet booth in the basement of Sever Hall. She would have been upstairs in a corridor with the other students, leaning against a wall with her books at her feet, or strolling past the unseeing faces. She could have transcended, knowing she had one of them at home, and could therefore move alone in a crowd. She puzzled over that paradox, but only briefly. The graffiti, I don't know how that went. It told me it was reconnecting, so I don't know if it's disconnected. But yes, she puzzled over that paradox, but only briefly. The graffiti. Down with capitalism and the fucking military-industrial complex. Kill all fascist pigs. This had been answered. You simplify too much. New ways, MCP Jason. Pigs batten on pig blood. The way is slow and hard. We must cleanse our minds of all that old shit. We must work in silence, exile, and cunning, like that MCP Joyce. We must have a revolution of sensibility. A third party entered the argument in purple ink. Anyone who supports the status quo is part of the problem. Time! The revolution is here! Kill pigs! Writer number 2 was apparently fond of this booth and had returned, for the next entry was in her handwriting and in the same pen. Those who live by the sword die by the sword. Wild printing in the purple felt tip followed this in great sprawling letters. Fucking Christian idiot! Take your maxims and stuff them. There is only power. Power to the people, power to the poor. We are dying by the sword now. The last outburst ended the symposium, but there were others like it scrawled on the side walls. Almost all of them were political. There were pasted on notices of SDS meetings, meetings of bread and roses, and daughters of Bellatrix. Mira withdrew her eyes from a crude drawing of female genitalia with "Cunt is beautiful" scratched beneath it. She presumed at least that it was a drawing of female genitalia, though it looked remarkably like a wide-petalled flower. She wasn't sure, because she'd never seen her own, that being part of the anatomy that did not present itself directly to the vision. She looked at her watch again. She could leave now. She stood, and from force of habit turned to flush the unused toilet. On the wall behind it, someone had printed great jagged letters in what looked like nail polish. The red enamel had dripped, and each stroke had a thick pearl at its base. It looked as if it had been written in blood. Some deaths take forever, it read. She drew her breath sharply and left the booth. It was 1968. Okay, end. Chapter 1, Part 1. Quick swig, and we're on to Chapter 1, Part 2. What time is it? It's 10 to 5. Now we got a little bit till actual story time. Let's see how far we can get and do an official catch-up. She washed her hands vigorously, almost from force of habit, and combed her hair, which was arranged in careful curls. She stood back, examining it. Yeah, it feels like there should be an extra syllable. She stood back, examining it in the glaring light of the lavatory. It looked a strange colour. Since she had stopped dyeing it last year, it had grown out not just greyer, but with a mousy tinge, so that she had not been tinting it, and this time it had come out perhaps too orange. She moved closer to the mirror and checked her eyebrows and the blue eyeshadow she had applied before. Both were still okay. She stepped back and tried to see her whole self. She couldn't do it. Ever since she had changed her style of dress, that is, ever since she had been at Harvard, her self refused to coalesce in the mirror. She could see bits and pieces, hair, eyes, legs, but the pieces wouldn't come together. The hair and eyes went together, but the mouth was wrong. It had changed during the past years. The legs were all right, but didn't go with the bulky shoes and the pleated skirt. They looked too thin under the thicker body. Yet she was the same weight now she'd been for the past 10 years. She began to feel something rising in her chest, and hastily looked away from the mirror. This was no time to get upset. Then she turned back jerkily, looking at nothing, pulled out her lipstick and applied a line of it to her lower lip, her eyes careful to look at nothing but the mouth. In spite of herself, however, her eyes caught her whole face, and in a moment her head was full of tears. She leaned her hot forehead against the cool tile wall, then remembered that this was a public place full of other people's germs, and straightened up hurriedly, and left the room. She climbed up the 3 flights of ancient, creaky stairs, reflecting that the ladies' room was in an inconvenient location, because it had been added long after the building was erected. The school had been planned for men, and there were places, she had been told, where women were simply not permitted to go. It was odd. Why, she wondered. Women were so unimportant anyway. Why would anyone bother to keep them out? She arrived in the corridor a little late. No one was left in the hallway, loitering outside classroom doors. The blank eyes, the empty faces, the young bodies that 10 minutes earlier had paced its length, were gone. It was these that, passing her without seeing her without looking at her, had driven her into hiding. For they had made her feel invisible. And when all you have is a visible surface, invisibility is death. Some deaths take forever, she found herself repeating as she walked into the classroom. I seem to be getting a few texts through, so I will put this up as the first section and check my shit out and be back. Probably get another bit done before story time tonight.